We're going to do a quick sketch with charcoal today. If you have a charcoal stick at home, that's great. Even if you don't have a charcoal stick, this is like something that you buy at the art store. If you have got a fireplace or a barbecue grill and there's a leftover remnant of charcoal or a piece of burnt wood in there, you can actually draw with that. That is charcoal. It may be a weird lumpy shape, but rather than a nice stick like this, but it'll still work. If you don't want to use the charcoal in that way, or if you don't have it, you can still do this with a piece of chalk or even a pastel if you have one. So we're working with charcoal. This is a kneaded eraser. This is really ideal for this project. Kneaded erasers are great to use with charcoal. If you don't have a kneaded eraser, you can still just use a regular school eraser. It'll be fine, but this is definitely better. Some masking tape, and this is the sketchbook again, and the photo that we are using today, it is pretty much a square format. It's the eggs on a towel in black and white. Okay, so I just taped off a square, and I like to tape off drawings like this that I know are going to fill the entire area. I like to have a nice white border at the end after I'm finished, so I kind of tape it off. It's not required, but I just like to do it. And in your sketchbook or on your piece of paper, you don't want to press the tape down too tightly because it can tear your paper when we take this off later. Before we get started, we're starting with bright white paper, and so with charcoal you always want to try to tone your paper, meaning you want to try to add a little bit of value to it so that there is some charcoal on the paper already to give it a little bit of value instead of it just being bright white. Now this is a little pounce that I made. This was just an old t-shirt that I put some graphite, some charcoal powder in, and you can see that when you touch it just deposits that. It's pretty handy. If you don't have that, that's okay. You can still just take your charcoal and you can take like a small piece of sandpaper and grind it against the sandpaper, and it'll make powder on your paper, which then you can spread around. Okay, so before I get started, I'm going to tone my paper with my charcoal, and I'm just rubbing this over to get a nice light value, and that's all I'm going to add. And I'm just going to rub it with my fingers a little bit to kind of distribute that evenly, so you can see it's not very dark. I just want a nice little tone to get started with, and it also makes it easier for the charcoal to start sticking to the paper. Alright, so for the drawing, just need to focus on getting your ovals in for the eggs. And I know there's a lot of stripes and things happening in the towel. Don't worry about that part right now. There is a line right here that indicates where the towel sort of folds over on itself. It's okay to get that line in. It's kind of important. We'll need it. And we will address these stripes, but the main thing is to get all of these shaded areas into place first, and then we'll put the stripes in. That'll be like one of the last things we do. Okay, all right, so I've got my toned area to start working, and I'm just going to come in here. This is going to be a really small sketch. Okay, so don't be afraid to make sure that your egg is going to fit in here. It's kind of tempting to, I'm actually drawing a little bit smaller than the photo is on my screen. So just want to get that first oval in. And again, just like on the others, if you want to watch this all the way through and then kind of do it along so that you can pause and work and listen and watch and kind of keep going, that's fine too. And then this other egg is just barely touching this one, and it goes off the page there. There we go. So I'm not putting a lot of pressure. I'm just making a nice little line to kind of indicate. And the only other thing we mentioned was this sort of, it's like a little curve in the fabric of that towel, just as a kind of guideline for us to know where to start putting our shadow in. Okay, so that's the basic drawing for this. Now comes the shading. Just like on the apple, if you had a chance to do that one, you want to start paying attention to where the values are really dark. Okay, so over on this side, definitely over on the underside of this one, because we do have a light source coming in from the left side. So we want to make sure that all of our shadows conform to that. I'm going to go ahead and come in here and just really start to lay in this dark color, this dark value. And remember, it's not random. You've got to put it right where it actually is. You don't want to make it up as you go. So just keep referring back to your photo. And if you notice, I'm kind of making little round marks when I know that the edge of my shadow needs to be kind of rounded. It's easier to just make rounded marks. But this is, if you squint at your egg, you can see it helps you to determine a little bit better right where that dark shape is. There's a little light spot right here. I'm protecting that. You can see it in your photo. See how there's a little light spot? That is because the light is bouncing off of this egg and coming back and hitting this one. And it's just a nice little touch. I don't want to lose that. All right, so I've got my darks in here. So now I can kind of start to very gently, just with my fingertip, I'm just starting to rub this. And unlike the crayon, I can kind of move this around a little bit more. It's loose powder sitting on top of the surface, and it just really likes to move around a lot. Now, it is possible to over rub this, and you wind up just lifting it completely off of the page. So just be careful with that you don't overdo it. And if you rub it too much and remove a lot of your tone, you can just put it right back in there. The egg does stay light right down here on the bottom. There's some reflected light coming back up off the towel, so you want to make sure you save it. Okay, I think that's all I want to do on that one for the moment. Now I want to turn my attention to this one. It's really dark up under here, so I want to make sure I get a nice value going, but then it starts to ease off, and that shadow stays pretty much really low and kind of wraps around the egg this way. Remember, they're round too, just like the apple. This is a lot different than working with the crayon. It's just so smooth. I love to work with charcoal. It's really fun to draw with. It's so fluid. Okay, so those shadows are looking okay for the moment. Now I'm going to come to the background. Now you can see there's a really light value here, and then immediately behind it the towel is really dark. Big contrast right there, so you want to make sure we preserve that. Same thing at the top of this egg. Okay, really light values here, really dark values here. So let's make sure that we have that when we come in to start adding this background. I'm going to go ahead and start really putting in a dark color, and notice you want to skip right around your egg. That dark color comes right next to the egg. I'm just going to keep laying this value in here. And to make it a little easier on myself, I'm just going to turn it upside down, just so that I can get right into that little point. It's a little tight area. And the shadow stays dark right behind the egg too. Okay, I'm going to turn it back around now. Alright, so all of this stays nice and dark, and it goes all the way over to that fold line. I'm going to rub this just a little bit so that I can kind of smooth that charcoal powder out. If you start having a big buildup of loose powder where you're constantly having to blow on the paper the whole time, you're depositing too much charcoal. You're using way too much pressure, and you just need to alleviate your pressure. All right, coming around the egg over here. Be careful when you put these dark lines right around your egg. It's easy to kind of, if you're not careful, you can accidentally change the shape of your egg, and you don't want to do that. Remember, I told you that we were going to do the stripes last, so just don't even worry about the stripes. Just pay attention to whether it's dark or light in these areas. There we go, because it kind of stops right on that stripe. As the color is coming around, it kind of, the shadow happens to coincide right with the edge of that stripe, so that's why I made such a line right here. All right, now the shadow picks back up again right up under the egg. Okay. Make sure you get these shadows in right up under the eggs. This one's really dark right up under the egg. It's almost the same color as the egg itself, but just a little bit darker right in the shadow. Just make sure that it's dark right in the core there. Okay. All right, now I want to take my kneaded eraser. This is what's so nice about these. You can manipulate them and shape them in whatever way you want, but they're really nice for lifting up charcoal. I've got, there's a big contrast with the egg, so you can see how light it is up top on both of these eggs, but then it's really dark behind. I want to make sure that I preserve that contrast, and it's not too bad here, but I still think I want to lift out a little bit more of this value. So you can see I can just come in here and just erase and just lift out that charcoal right there, and you can see that it gets a little bit brighter. It really takes lifts a lot of that out of there. It doesn't work so well with pencil, the kneaded eraser, but you can see how much brighter that is. The same thing is happening over here on this egg too. I need to really lift out some of this value so that it's a lot brighter. And I can just kind of soften that edge. Some of this may have even been a little bit too dark. Some of this other shadow up here. There we go. Remember that little light spot that we talked about in the beginning? You want to make sure that you keep that little spot. It is dark though right here. If you're going through and you see a little spot that you need to reinforce, go ahead and do it. You might have missed it, the first time around. Oops. You have to be careful when you're working with these light areas. I had some charcoal on my finger, and so when I went to soften it a little bit, I made a stray mark. Now the underside here, it is light under here. I'm gonna try to lift out just a little bit, just so that I can control it, the shading a little bit. It's not this light under here, but I needed to move some of that out of there so that I could kind of blend it a little bit better so that it was nice and smooth. Okay, there we go. Make sure it's nice and dark under there. All right, so now for our stripes, let's turn our attention to that right quick, because we've just about got, this is a nice little sketch just the way it is, but if you want to add these stripes in, just make sure that all of the shading has been done on the towel. There is a little bit of shading that needs to take place right over here. I can see that the towel has got a little bit of a shadow happening right there, and also right in this little area right here. Okay, so just make sure that all your shading is done, and then when you come in to add your stripes, they're just going to lay right on top of all the shading that you've already done. See, it would be very difficult to try to go in between any of these lines that you've made and reestablish a new shadow in between the lines. So these the stripes that are on the towel in the shaded area, they're back there. They're really, really dark. So you can lay the charcoal on a little bit heavy back here just to make sure that you get those stripes. And this is the one that comes around to the front that we saw. Then right up here under the egg. And these sort of continue back behind here too. I kind of disturbed my shadow when I did that. Just fix that up a little bit. Okay, and I think that's pretty much that. All we need for this one. So now I'm going to very carefully peel my tape away. And you just want to make sure that you pull, keep the tape really low. Don't hold it up and yank it. Keep it really low and pull away from your artwork always. The tape could possibly tear into the paper a little bit. And if it did that, you want to make sure that it tears away from your drawing and not into it. After you get done with this, charcoal's really messy, so you got a couple of options. You can actually take this page out of your sketchbook if you want to, or leave it in. But in either case, you want to spray some fixative on top of it, and that's typically an art supply. If you don't have any of that, you can actually just use some hairspray. If you've got just an aerosol can of hairspray, just spray over it, maybe just on the kitchen table. Don't saturate it and get it wet, but just spray it, let it sit for a second and dry, and give it about 3 coats, and letting it dry in between. If you had any stray marks on your paper, you can just use those to erase. But there's our charcoal drawing for today.